My name is Ronak Agarwal and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So, lately I had been preparing for an interview. I was discussing behavioral questions, I was discussing technical questions. So, today was the interview. It's 4th of June 2026, and I had my interview for a corporate financial advisor role at a Western Australian government agency. My, I had thought that I would be asked technical questions like walk me through a DCF model or tell me how a relative valuation is done. But that was not the questions that I was asked. The interview mainly focused on five questions. At the beginning of the interview, I was given those five questions and I was given 15 minutes to prepare an answer for them. After I had prepared, I was called into the interview room where we started discussing on those questions. So today I'm going to be discussing what were those questions and what answers did I give for them. Let us start. So the first question was, tell us about a time where you had to explain a complex financial concept to any client or stakeholder, and what were the steps that you undertook and any challenges if you faced. So for this question, my entire approach was on the basis of my experience at Cossack Kodari Securities. Over there, I was responsible for in-depth analysis and research of market trends and give and prepare investor briefings. So for this question, what I told them was we had an assignment at work where we had to analyze investment opportunities across Southeast Asian countries, specifically India and Singapore. So for our client, we had to give investment recommendations. So we were to compare the companies across the two nations. My team was going ahead with using the price equity ratio. But from my understanding about macroeconomics, there are various factors such as the inflation rate, expected risk-free return, or any other sovereign risk. These can have an impact on the real interest rate in the country, and therefore on the valuation and multiples for company. Therefore, you'll realize developing nations having higher sovereign risk, they tend to have lower multiples as compared to developed nations. So it was my recommendation that instead of using PE ratio, we use the PEG ratio, that's the PEG ratio, where we take the PE ratio for the level of growth rate in the country. This way we can actually get a normalized comparable value between the two subcontinents. The challenge I faced was to making them actually understand what were the reasons why this was happening. I told them that different countries they have different sovereign risk, which would impact the risk-free rate, which will boil down to their difference in cost of equity and cost of debt, which will impact the DCF model, further impacting the free cash flow of the firm and therefore the valuation of the firm, which again translates to the share price, and hence such macroeconomic difference is something that we need to consider. This was my answer. So in cross question they asked me, so did I give this explanation in front of a huge audience, or was it a written explanation, or was it a group discussion verbal? So to this I answered that it was initially in a small group where I was telling my team and my manager like these are my thoughts, convincing them that this could be an approach that could be used. My manager asked me to provide a written report where I gave my assumptions backed by backed by real life data, and I gave them a written document like what is the ratio that we should use, and I actually calculated the peg ratio for the various companies under consideration, and that's how I tackled this problem. So this was overall what I answered for this question. Then we went to the next question. That was, tell us about a time where you missed a deadline or were unable to provide a quality of work which was expected off of you. Again, so for this answer, I went back to my job job role at Kosekudari Securities. Having said earlier that I was also responsible for preparing the investor briefings. So on the afternoon where the investor briefings were due to be submitted, there was the tariff announcement by the Trump administration. It was sometime around May 2025. So there was sudden market dynamics had changed. So we didn't have enough time nor the data to actually give the investor future prospect, like what are we expecting for the how are we expecting the market to move. So in that case, what happened was I had to divert my focus on this role, this duty of mine, and I had to talk to my uni professors. Like, this is a scenario, so I would need a week's deadline extension so that I can give my 100% to the quality of work that I submit in my assignment. Again, the same thing applied to this job of mine. That is, given that there were certain sudden changes in the market, how did I tackle it? Their question was, given that there was sudden change in the market dynamics, did I proceed with submitting the same report, or did I change the report? To which I answered that I did not have enough time to change the report. So what I did was, after the report, I gave a disclaimer that the information provided in this report is appropriate for the time till now, but given the recent market developments, these being unprecedented times, we need a little more time to understand the market movement and see how such changes are impacting our investors. So this was my answer. The interviewers, sorry, they asked me whether I gave this explanation directly to the client or my manager. I told him this was given by me to the manager, and I understand that since I am having to do a work which is essential, I don't want to give half hearted attempts. So that's why whatever I do, I give reasonable assumptions and reasoning behind it. Like, why is this happening? The third question was, tell us about a system that you follow which helps you stay alert and avoid errors while doing any repetitive task or long term task. This was a very interesting question. When I first read this question, I was like, huh, how is this related to any task at hand? But however, I thought, like, what would I do? I had never done this before. But I had to think, what would I do? I imagine I told them that be doing a task which could be a long term task or having being repetitive, we tend to forget what was our thought process while starting a work. Like, this is for the long term thing, or when we are doing a monotonous task over and over again, we tend to go into the autopilot mode and we just miss out on certain points. So my approach was, what I do is, for repetitive tasks, I finish the first draft. I initially keep a checklist of the things that I need to focus on, because this task is something that I have to do on again and again. So I would keep a checklist, like these are the things that I have to check before submitting it. I prepare the first draft. I take a break of 5 to 10 minutes and look at it from a fresh pair of eyes to actually identify if I made any mistakes, and then I rectify it. Coming on to long term tasks, what I do is I keep a weekly note. I take a weekly note of all the decisions that I'm taking and the reasons and assumptions behind them. And I tend to review them on a weekly basis so that I know that even after a couple of weeks, the position that I am in, I know how did we get there and what was our rational and thought process at different stages of the thing. So this was my answer, and as far as I remember, there was no follow-up questions for this. The fourth question was, tell us about a time where you had to tackle various responsibilities, particularly various tasks together, and how did you go about it? So for this, I told them like last year I graduated in December 2025. So last year I was working at Kosekudari Securities, and I was also pursuing a master's in banking and finance. So I was having to juggle two different aspects of my life together, and both were at the top of my priority list. So there was no way I could not deliver. Like I had to deliver the deliverables. So what I used to do was I used to keep a checklist of short-term objectives that I need to fulfill and long-term objectives that I need to fulfill. On the basis of that, I taking the short-term objective, I used to make a priority list. What are the things that I need to do first, second, third, fourth? Same for the long-term task. According to that, I used to do I used to do time blocking in my calendar. Like this is the time I need to do this. This is the time I need to do this. So in this way, I would be able to arrange all the tasks at hand and how do I go about it. The follow-up question was, what if in a situation you are given a task and you need to squeeze it somewhere, like you don't have enough time but you have to squeeze it somewhere, how do you go about it? So I told him again, so when I get a new task, I see where in the priority hierarchy it lies. If it's immediate requirement, then it being a requirement, since if it's an immediate requirement, it being a priority, I have to prioritize it over the others. However, knowing that there are people who actually would be requiring my input and my results, I personally think I am accountable for what I do. I personally am accountable, so I can't leave somebody else hanging. So what I do is I would not push forward the other task, but instead every task will have to be assigned a little less time, where I have to work more efficiently on that so as to deliver equal result in a short span of time. I didn't know then when what was a good answer, whether there was a good answer or not, but this was my logic. I thought, what would I do in that situation, and that's what I said. Now, how they interpret it, it's all on them. Now, coming on to the final question. Tell us about a time where you used complex financial or data analysis tool to formulate a model for any client or stakeholder. This was a very interesting question because here they have asked whether I have used these softwares for any client or stakeholder, which I have never. Nor could I lie, because this is a question which would actually determine my exposure to client deals. And if I say something which is not actually true, they would be able to see right through me. So what I did was I told them that I have experience in using financial complex statement for to formulate a business valuation where I was valuing Whitehaven Coal. However, that was not for a client or stakeholder, but for a unit assignment of mine. And given that it is so similar to a real life scenario, I treated it like a very important modeling task. I explained like I scraped the data from Excel and Refinitiv. I normalized it to use the last 12-month data. I gathered the pair data, and I did the trading comp analysis to get the enterprise value and the share value on the basis of multiples. I also used DCF model with the respective FCFF forecast and terminal value calculation, and calculating the weighted average cost of capital to discount them further and obtain the enterprise value. And that enterprise value was again compared to the enterprise value obtained from the trading comps to actually give me a final value for the company. Now, this was my answer. The head of advisory role, he was one of the interviewers. He was like, "So, Ronak, this is a very textbook example that you said, the textbook procedure. It's been there for more than 30 years. I've used it. Everybody uses it for the last 30 years because this is a very textbook thing and that's how things work. But tell me, what inputs did you use? How did you use your creativity for this? Because my reason for asking this question is when you are presenting to a client, they could ask questions for which you have no answer. How do you justify this? Why is this happening? So in that case, we want someone who can think outside the box. Who can think outside the box, who can think creatively, like why is this happening? I took a minute to myself to think, did I do anything specific? Because everything else, whatever I said, whatever I did, they were all textbook examples followed from the book. What did I do? I told them, to be honest, I don't think I did anything out of the box in this. I was trying to create a model, and for me, my objective was to be able to come down to a valuation that could actually be justified. Reasonable, I want to come down to a reasonable valuation. So I just picked up whatever method there was at hand and I just use it that way. But no, I did not, I could not think of anything outside the box. I don't know how this would work for me, but the head of advisory, he was appreciative that I had it in me to actually admit that I did not do anything creative, and he said that it's absolutely fine. It's a model after all. But it takes a he was appreciative that I admitted it. So after that, they told me that it was a great experience and being able to reach the interview, in-person interview in the head office, that's a big deal in itself. But they let me know. So yeah, this was my overall first interview experience where I was actually asked on real life question, not just tell me something about yourself and internship type questions, but it was a core advisory role question with different tasks at hand, like what do I have to do, what would you do. So yeah, overall it was nice. So I realized one thing, technicals is fine, like technical is you understand how things work, but how you apply those technicals in certain situations, that's a very important aspect of any job. And jobs and interviews are not actually a test, but they want to see how have you done something like this. They want to know how you reacted in such situations. So yeah, interviews are cool. We just have to practice more behavioral questions. Because another reason for practicing behavioral question is not just being able to tell them, but actually formulate an idea, like how, even if you haven't done something like that, preparing, making a story out of it, practicing it, it'll make you believe that you have actually done it. So when you face such situations in the future, you would already have been doing that in your mind for quite some time now. So yeah, that's that. Looking forward to further steps in the application process for this company or for some other company. And in the meanwhile, I'll keep on studying for my CFA. So let's see how it goes. Thank you.